Okay, so my Christmas book list, this is not all for me, but hopefully it will give you just a little idea about things if you're buying for your dad, your mum, your sister, your brother, your aunt, etc. Obviously, our top choice this Christmas is Alex's book, Clothes and Other Things That Matter, which, as you say, is a really in-depth and fascinating insight into what clothes means to us. And here we have her trench coats and her take on what the white shirt means. So I would really recommend it just as a kind of sociological read, as well as a, fashion read, and, a little bit about Alex's life as well. So that's great. So that's top pick, obviously. And I'm going to do this kind of, category by category. So I'm going to look at some political books. And this year, you just cannot ignore, obviously, the American election. And the really, really big book this year is going to be Barack Obama, already out, already selling. I think it sold 1 million copies in its first day sale in America.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know, it's going to be a really big one. I mean, he has written other books, and they are incredibly literary and insightful. I mean, he has got the gift of the gab, this guy. So it's obviously his Irish background. As he famously said, the Obamas lost their apostrophe, but they have got some Irish antecedents. So, but you can't overlook, obviously, Kamala Harris's, or Kamala Harris's, isn't it? Her book as well, which came out last year, but is obviously having a huge kind of resurgence this year. And Joe Biden, our new president in waiting, is also got a book out this year. Now, I did read horrifically that there is some expectation that Melania is going to publish a book. So obviously that will be next year, but my God, we are going to be inundated with American political books.
I wonder if it'll be a book about her style or her Christmas decoration. That's one blessing, isn't it?
How to dig up a rose garden, whatever it is she did. Yeah. So fiction is, I love fiction. And there's been a load of good fiction this year, despite the problems that the industry has had in getting books to customers. The Booker, obviously, only just been announced, and the winner was Shuggie Bain, by a debut author from Scotland. And it's raw, and it's very autobiographical, and it sounds like quite a tough read, but it has had fantastic reviews. And it's very much, alcoholic mother. He died at home when the author was only 16. I think it's a tough read. But that is obviously one, if you've got a literary friend to go for.
Great. That sounds really interesting.
So my real standout novel that I've read this year is the Maggie O'Farrell Hamnet. And I'm clearly not alone in this, because this has won loads of prizes, Women's Prize for Fiction, just been announced as the Waterson's Book of the Year. It was the Books in My Bag Reader's Choice. And this is an historical novel in that it's based on Shakespeare, although he's never named in the book, and his son Hamnet, who died really sadly. So from the minute you start reading this book that the boy is going to die, and that makes it incredibly poignant. It really is. But it is a wonderful book and a wonderful reimagining of Elizabethan life.
Amazing. So that would be your top fiction pick.
That is my top fiction pick, yes, definitely. But there's loads of other things to mention, so don't, just think about that. I mean, my other one is this Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud, which is quite difficult because it's written in dialect, but actually once you get into it, you just love it. And that's had, I think it's on a Costa shortlist, just been announced. And then this wonderful Love in Colour, which is a retelling of folk tales from West Africa and some classical folk tales from, e.g., ancient Greece, just kind of reimagining those characters in different worlds. And I think she was on the Groucho Book Club, wasn't she?
Yes, that's very well picked, because, yes, I think she was our first book club interviewee. Yeah. She spoke very passionately about wanting to decolonize fairy tales. And yeah, I've read the book myself, and it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, so that's a good pick. And then there are a couple of other books on the Booker shortlist, which I haven't read, but I've put on my Christmas list. So we have Real Life which is going to be interesting. Debut novel again, gay black doctorate student in America. Shadow King by Maza Mengiste, which is all about Ethiopia, which is a country I have travelled in and I absolutely love, but is clearly having some tough times at the moment. And then I've put this in because this will be a big fiction book this Christmas, I think, the Elena Ferranti, The Lying Life of Adults, which follows on, it's not the same characters, but it's also set in Naples, and a lot of people loved her earlier series of books. I have to say, I hated them. Absolutely couldn't read them.
Really? Well, that's so interesting. I raced through them in a matter. I think I read them, all 4 of them, in about 2 days.
Couldn't bear them. So, you know, but which may mean you don't listen to any of my other recommendations, but that's there for the fans.
Indeed. So that's one for me, but maybe not you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a couple of books from really, you know, those authors who really produce readable book after readable book after readable book. So William Boyd's new book, Trio, and Jonathan Coe's new book, Mr. Wilder and Me, which both have had excellent reviews. So I would really, both on my Christmas list, I would look forward to reading both. They're both fantastically, you know, reliable authors, I would think it's fair to say.
Great.
We're going to turn to nature. A big book this Christmas, obviously, will be the David Attenborough book, Our Life on the Planet. I mean, you know, he's a national treasure now. He's 94. This is a man who has basically watched the world destroy itself and has now kind of come out to say, guys, we've just got to look at what we're doing to the planet. And this is his witness statement. That's what he says. This is what we have to beware of. So that's going to, sorry?
Is it kind of phrased like a court case? This is his sort of statement.
Yes, yes. So
that's interesting.
I think it's from his personal experience. I mean, it is from his personal experience and what he has seen, and also how his views have changed over the years, you know. So and he still feels that we got time to change things. So there's a kind of positive message there as well. But it's really
very hopeful.
Yeah, exactly. A book that may have gone under the radar, The Book of Trespass, which I think sounds really interesting. So by the law of trespass, we are excluded from 92% of the land in this country because it's privately owned and you don't have right of access, which is absolutely amazing. And he's arguing really that social inequality is caused by the uneven distribution of land. Obviously, this is not music to big landowners' ears, but I do think there is kind of point here that, you know, land is owned by very tiny percent of the population. I think there was some finding recently that 80% of the land's owned by 1% of the population or something bizarre like that. It really is very odd.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've heard a lot about that and about how we give a lot of public money in the common agricultural policy to a lot of these landowners who are, so
exactly.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating.
So that all kind of feeds into that. So I thought that sounded interesting, that book. So I got that on my Christmas list. And then this book has had quite a lot of kind of reviews. It's just sounds really bizarre, mind-altering journey showing that fungi provide a key to understanding the planet on which we live and life itself.
Ooh.
So I leave that with you. Sounds interesting. And then some more. Diary of a Young Naturalist has been a fantastic success. 17-year-old, kind of obviously a kind of loner boy, Irish boy, and he kind of turns to nature. And he wrote this book and it has won loads of awards. It's been amazing. It won the Wainwright Prize for Nature, and it's a finalist of the Baillie Gifford, and it was the winner of the Books in My Bag nonfiction. So I think that sounds really interesting, how he kind of found himself through nature. A lovely gift book, Royal Gardens of the World, which would definitely be one for my mother, I think.
Oh, this would be one for my mother too. Tell me more about it.
And then Monty Don, who I have a really soft spot for, I must say. And this is an homage to Nigel, which is his lovely dog who died. He died earlier this year, which was obviously, you know, a terrible moment in the gardening community around the world when Nigel bit the dust.
Oh, how lovely.
Cookery. The standout book, obviously, well, I don't say obviously, but I would guess the standout book is going to be Nigella's Cook, Eat, Repeat. She's back on our tellies, not floating around in a lovely negligee this time. She's a bit more sensibly dressed, I think. But I say her food is just so straightforward and looks so delicious. I think this will be on many people's Christmas lists.
And have you seen any of the recipes in this one?
I have. My goodness me. There's a lot of, well, one is this fish finger border.
Oh, that sounds good.
It's been amazing. Apparently sales of fish fingers went up something like 97% the next day after that one went out. So
she recovered from her avocado on toast in the last book.
Yes, well, she's got the same impact. And I really like this series, the roasting tin series, where you get, you know, your whole meal just in one tin in the oven. That is kind of, particularly in lockdown, definitely my kind of cooking. And this is a bit more exotic, and it's taking recipes from around the world. So I just thought that sounded really lovely. Ottolenghi, can never overlook Ottolenghi. He sells fantastically well. This is a load of recipes, vegetarian vegetable recipes, and you know, he's gone that way in recent years, much more less meat, much more vegetables, and I think that suits the style of most people's cooking these days. And then something that's a little bit more contemplative. It's not really recipes, but it's kind of 15 or so writers talking about the meaning of food, what it means in our lives, how we react to food. You know, it's kind of a little bit more thoughtful about food and its place in everyone.
Sounds really interesting.
Thrillers, obviously a really popular genre.
Oh, very good for my upcoming holiday.
Big standout book here is the old Richard Osman, who's obviously the TV personality, all-time good guy, fantastic brain. Thursday Murder Club, it's very cozy crime, I think I could call it. You know, group of people in a retirement home who solve murders and then have one in their midst that they have to solve. So I would say that's a reasonably safe bet for almost anyone on your Christmas list who likes that kind of thing. My personal favourite is Tana French. I think she's an Irish American, I think, actually. She writes quite hard-nosed, slightly surreal, mostly set in Ireland, quite literary, quite readable thrillers. So I would recommend this new one, although it's out of sequence. I mean, it's not in her normal style. So I think this one sounds really interesting. Pine by Francine Toon, recommended particularly by Pages of Hackney, who are obviously the booksellers for this club. They say it's been selling really well with them. It's a literary gothic thriller, and it was shortlisted for the Bloody Scotland's Scottish crime debut of the year this year. So that's a bit of a dark horse that sounds really interesting. And obviously Robert Harris, who's just also fantastically reliable, writes really great books. His latest is V2, set over, I think, about 4 days in the end of the Second World War. So I would say that's pretty reliable for anyone you want to give it to.
That sounds like a good one for my dad.
I think it would be really interesting. He does fantastic research. He really gets the background. I thought it was amusing. There was kind of 2 books out this Christmas by booksellers, which is a kind of very niche little genre in some way. Sean Bithell has written a couple of other books which people may know about. He's kind of very sardonic, and he writes about the people who buy books in his secondhand bookshop in Wigtown, which is a kind of hay in terms of lots and lots of booksellers there, and they have literary festivals and things like that. And this is, you know, really another way into the subject of all these weird people who love books and come and spend time in his bookshop, and from whom he makes his living. So he, you know, it's kind of quite interesting. And Martin Latham is the manager of Waterstones in Canterbury, very long-standing bookseller. And this is kind of part cultural history, part literary love letter, part memoir. I mean, a bit like Alex's book, you know, you start writing a book about a topic and you find yourself in all those chapters. So I think that will be really interesting because Martin has been a good commentator on the industry for many years. So I'm interested to read that one. So moving quickly on, don't want to take too much longer. Biography memoirs. I mean, there is a big book, I would say, this autumn, the Craig Brown, which is, it's not really a, well, it is a book. It's kind of memoir about the Beatles. And it's the Beatles in time. It's just won, actually, the Baillie Gifford Prize, which is one of the kind of very highly respected prizes. And it's not conventional in terms of, it's not kind of sequential, as in they did this and they did that and they did the other. He takes themes, I mean, he writes very irreverently, as everyone knows, because he wrote that so-called biography of Princess Margaret, which kind of created quite a stir in its time, I think. And this sounded like a really fun way into the subject. You know, they are so iconic, and it's all around, you know, the people they worked with and how people got driven kind of into their vortex and cast out again, and so on. So that sounds interesting. Something I've been very much enjoying recently is Grace Dent's Hungry. I don't know if anybody knows Grace Dent. She writes...
I've been watching her on MasterChef.
Yeah, she's a long-time MasterChef, but I really know her because she writes restaurant reviews, and they are wonderfully witty. And she is wonderfully witty as well. And this is just a very interesting memoir. You know, she came from a very underprivileged background. I mean, you know, she wasn't lacking for food or anything, but it is what we would think as not someone who, and she was just desperate to get into the media and get, you know, get a high profile job. And she does it. I mean, it is fantastic the way she does it. But underlying all that is the rather sad story of her father, who she absolutely adores, and his descent into Alzheimer's, really, and doesn't really recognize them anymore, and how they cope with that, and how she copes with that with her incredibly busy life, you know, racing all over the country, reviewing books, reviewing restaurants for us.
Oh, I'll have to get that one. I am a big fan of hers.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then two others, Diary of an MP's Wife, which I have not read, but created a huge stir when it came out a few months ago, which is dishing the dirt on the Camerons and the Chipping Norton set. And I can see some people being interested in that as Christmas gifts. And then Lem Sissy, this actually is a paperback. It came out last year. My Name is Why. Unbelievably moving. Just the most terrible story about an adoption, and his mother would like to be put in touch with him and wants him back, and no one ever tells him. He doesn't really discover even his real name till he's a teenager, and you know, the just terrible trauma, and a guy who has just transcended it, really, and just, you know, created a hugely successful life for himself. So it is a really telling story about, you know, social services, frankly. Non-fiction?
Non-fiction, yes, if we could race through these just so
yeah, sorry. So there are just 4 non-fiction books that I think could be of interest to everyone. And one of them, Humankind, A Hopeful History, is, as it says, you know, taking a rather positive look about our life. Then finally, I think children. So for the younger children, Maggie O'Farrell's First Books for Children, which is a lovely uplifting kind of someone overcoming sadness and everything. Gender Swap Fairy Tales is my pick for this genre. It's a wonderful thing where a couple have gone into used a computer program and swapped gender. So every he becomes she, every beautiful becomes handsome, and you read the stories through a completely different lens. And it just really changes your whole idea about a beauty as a noun, but you can't say a handsome, for instance. So you just suddenly start questioning everything. So I think, although it's a children's book, frankly, I think everyone could and should read that.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah. Others that particularly Pages of Hackney are recommending at the moment. The Benjamin Safanaya is obviously about racism, Black Lives Matter, but also about bravery and unsung heroes. 9+. When Stars Are Scattered is a graphic novel, a remarkable graphic novel about growing up in a refugee camp. and 8 Pieces of Silver is a young adult thriller, so for the older child that you might have to buy for. And finally, some booking fillers, which I probably don't need to explain. And just, you know, little fun books for anyone in your life, I would think.
Thank you so much, Jo.